everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Twitter, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. As always, I am Bryson Carver, and do we have a Wednesday show for you? I'd say that, listen, there's a lot of important topics on the show today, a lot of important segments regarding Carving It Up, but there's a big one at the end of today's show, and I'm just going to spoil it right off the bat. We got a football game to predict. An actual NFL game that counts. Detroit, Kansas City, a game that was already interesting enough for me, considering the fact that on Monday's show, I did, after all, pick the Detroit Lions to get to the NFC Championship game and lose to the Dallas Cowboys. But listen, Kansas City now without Chris Jones, potentially, although he says there's a possibility he could play in this game, and Travis Kelce now dealing with a knee injury. I'll predict that game later on today's show, actually at the very end of today's show, rather. Also, carving up the context, and while I won't spoil it right now immediately, let me tell you something, y'all. I'm fired up. I am fired up for this Carving Up the Context segment because this one, if this one ever needed context, stay tuned. All right, also going to get into a new segment to Carving It Up. It's called Bryson's Best 10. We'll be doing this every week in the NFL season. I'll be ranking the 10 best teams in football. My best team in football. It is, after all, called Bryson's Best 10. It's my list. Be ranking the best 10 teams in the National Football League. I'll get to that. Also, Sean Payton really putting Russell Wilson in his place to a certain degree. My goodness, he didn't pull any punches, at least according to ESPN recently. So, again, a lot to... Let's adjust the camera right there. Yeah, there we go. A lot to get into on today's show. So, but first, I didn't get a chance to talk about this on Monday because I was doing the NFL prediction show with Ryan Flowers on Monday. By the way, had a blast doing that show. It's as fun of a show and Carving It Up as I've ever done. So shout out to Ryan, Clutch Sports Talk. He'll be coming to y'all this Sunday morning. You should tune in at 11 a.m. Eastern on the Grid. And I appreciate the positive sentiment that we have both received. I appreciate it a lot for sure. Love NFL prediction shows and love doing it with Ryan. But because we did that show, I didn't get an opportunity to talk about Colorado's win over TCU. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about Prime. And let's, frankly, at the end of this, let's talk about Shedeur Sanders. Because Colorado went on the road as a 20-point dog to TCU and beat a team that just played in the national championship game. And first of all, I know what you're going to say. Oh, come on, Bryson. TCU's returning, and they're not returning that many players. They lost their quarterback. They lost their star receiver. Lost a lot of other players. Here's the difference, though. Their backups that are now starters, particularly their quarterback, obviously. A lot of these guys on TCU's team, they were there last year. They know Sonny Dykes' system. They know the culture at TCU that they set, having obviously a magical year last year, getting to the Big 12 title game, beating Michigan in the semifinal game, and obviously getting dog-walked by Georgia, no pun intended, in the national championship game. But they know how the TCU system works. Colorado, sure, you could say the talent was there, and it obviously was there. You had Shedeur Sanders, you had Travis Hunter, a lot of other guys coming in. That Edwards kid was amazing. The running back, Dylan Edwards, was awesome. I think he had 4 touchdowns. A lot of those guys were new to Colorado. Some of those guys were new to Prime. Again, Colorado replaced 85% of their players coming into this football game. At least dating back to last season, that is, when they went 1-11 and their average margin of defeat was nearly 30 points. And I would be sitting up here, listen, I believed in Prime from the beginning when they made the hire in Colorado. Now, I didn't know Colorado was going to be moving to the Big 12 next year, but back then when I wasn't aware of that information, I said within 2 years, kind of like what I said about with Lincoln Riley, Colorado would be in contention for a Pac-12 title. Well, now I'll revise that to say next year they'll be in contention for a Big 12 title. There's no question about that, especially with Oklahoma and Texas being gone. It's wide open for the Buffs to take advantage of just that. But I would be lying to you, even as the biggest Prime fan, if I'd have told you, yeah, they're going to go into TCU, hostile environment, and win. Big national noon game on Fox. You know, it was the most watched game as far as I know. I think it was the most watched college football game of the weekend. If it wasn't, it was top 3. All eyes on Colorado, and they go into TCU. I mean, first drive score. Travis Hunter's making plays. Obviously, third quarter, he had the huge interception, which you could argue was the difference of the game. Obviously, he had a big third down and long catch from Shedeur Sanders. More on him later. But I want to talk about Deion Sanders because he's gotten a lot of pushback over the past now few days since the Colorado win. And some people, and this is fair, have said, hey, let's pull back a little bit. Let's not just, overreact to one win. Colorado's goal wasn't just to beat TCU and then they're chilling the rest of the year, the last 11 games, plus potentially a bowl game, obviously, in the future. They're just going to relax. No. Deion set the standard, Prime set the standard. They'll obviously be focused beyond this. But folks are criticizing Prime, criticizing Colorado players for kind of taking a victory lap to a certain degree, which they should have. They, meaning Colorado, should have taken a victory lap. Deion Sanders has had to hear for the past 9 months or so, ever since he made the move from Jackson State to Colorado. He's had to hear for the last 9 months about how this is a gimmicky move, about how this is just to promote his own personal brand. He's Deion Sanders, folks. There's a lot of ways he can promote his brand. He doesn't have to coach. You know how hard being a college football head coach is? I would argue harder than an NFL coach. That's why they make more money mostly. Certainly the top coaches, your Nick Sabans of the world, your Kirby Smarts of the world, make more than NFL coaches. Why? It's a harder job. It's not just it is a 12-month, 365-day-a-year job in which you got to coach. You got to obviously make sure your players are involved with their studies, with work at school. They got to recruit all year, travel across the country. It's a hard job. Deion doesn't have to do that to promote his brand. Deion could coach high school football. He was on the NFL Network for a long time as an analyst. He was a great broadcaster. Could have went to Fox or ESPN or any of these other networks and been very successful and very, very well loved. He's doing this to provide an opportunity for some of these kids to give a platform. And, it's a gimmicky move. And a lot of folks criticized how he went into Colorado. You remember this? When he went into that meeting, his first meeting as the Buffs head coach, and he told the team, at least the team that was there, I'm bringing in a lot of guys here, so if you're not good enough, get out. And according to Joel Klatt, who played at Colorado, probably is Colorado's greatest quarterback, although he could very well be surpassed this year by Shedeur Sanders, Joel Klatt said about 19 to 20 of the players for Colorado, they kind of worked with them to see, you're not going to make the team, or not going to make the team. You're probably not going to get a whole lot of playing time. Where can we help you transfer and see if you can get playing time elsewhere? Everybody else, quit, left. Coach Prime caught a lot of flack for that. Saying, how could you just crush the dreams of these kids? First of all, these kids are going to have opportunities elsewhere. And two, Prime's establishing a culture. Now, you could make the strong case that not a whole lot of coaches could have done that. Nick Saban probably could have. Again, Kirby Smart probably could have. I think Urban Meyer probably could have if Urban Meyer was still coaching. Some coaches could be in that position that others wouldn't. We understand that. But Deion is great for college football. Why is that? He brings a bravado. He brings a swag. But it isn't just to promote his personal brand. He's a darn good football coach. Game 1 at TCU against a team that just competed in the national championship game with a brand new roster. And they go on the road and win. Offensive line plays relatively well. Shedeur Sanders is amazing. Travis Hunter is amazing. Dylan Edwards is amazing. Defense made some plays, particularly in that last fourth down at the end, when it looked like TCU was starting to drive a little bit. Situational football, they were good. They seemed more poised at times than TCU did. Again, Sonny Dykes is a very good college football coach. They seem more poised than TCU despite being on the road. So, yeah, Prime, Colorado, yes, you can take a victory lap. You were 20-point dogs. I saw one pundit, I think it was on Barstool, he was covering Utah. He's a Utah fan, and he was talking about how, don't purchase Colorado tickets now. Wait till later in the season. They'll be dirt cheap. They'll be terrible when they're 0-6. So, yes, Colorado can take a victory lap. Now, they've got a big game against Nebraska this week. Last I checked, they're about a 2.5 point favorite in that game. I think they'll win. But looking at them now, and obviously they got a huge matchup against USC next month, cannot wait to see that. Two of the best quarterbacks in the nation squaring off. Two of the best coaches in the nation squaring off. Yeah, I think that game's in Colorado. It's either, I forget where it's at. That's in, that game's in Colorado. It's going to be very fun. Looking forward to it. But good for Deion. He's great for college football. He brings college football they don't exactly have an issue with marketing, but he brings a certain aspect to it that maybe didn't have before. A guy who doesn't care what the media pushback is. Again, kind of similar to Saban in certain regards. We see him and Saban doing the silly Aflac commercials with the duck. There's some parallels between the two. Not saying Deion's going to go on and win 7 national championships or however many Nick Saban's won and become one of the, on the Mount Rushmore of college coaches. He could. I mean, I'm not putting it past him. He's freaking prime time. But there are some parallels there that he can help Colorado build a very successful program very quickly. So, to all those who push back against him, called him everything in the book, went at him for the last 9 months, you have to hold this. You have to hold this. Last thing in Colorado before we move on. Talking about Deion Sanders' son, Shedeur Sanders. The only game I saw him play in college was the SWAC championship game. The SWAC conference was where Jackson State plays. And the conference title game, I saw Shedeur Sanders. I also saw Travis Hunter, who played great in that game as well. I was like, dang, Shedeur's pretty good. Like, he's a nice young quarterback. And then I saw him in week 1 on Saturday. Holy smokes. That is an NFL quarterback. I tweeted that during the game. I said he's making NFL throws. He made one throw. I don't know if it was to Travis Hunter or to somebody else. Second half, he made a throw down the right sideline. It was on a deep ball. It could not, again, what they say that it would have been just as good if he'd have ran 40 yards down the field and handed the ball to a guy. It was that perfect. It was like a long handoff, so to speak. Making tough throws, accurate throws, had touch on them, was smart with the football. Again, 38 for 47. That's an incredible completion percentage. 4 touchdowns, had 5, not a rushing touchdown. He had 4 touchdowns through the air, a QBR of 90. Round up, it could be 91 and 510 yards, which is a Colorado record. Listen, I know that this draft and the one after it, 2024 and 25, are going to be stacked up with quarterbacks. Obviously, Caleb Williams is the headliner for this NFL draft. I'm actually going to try and talk about Caleb Williams on Friday because we didn't have enough time to fit him in today's show, but an interesting story surrounding him and his potential NFL future. But I think Drake May is excellent. I think Penix Jr. at Washington is tremendous. The kid, I think Riley is his name, at Duke, looked great against Clemson. Then again, a lot of quarterbacks are looking great against Clemson these days. But the point is, next year's draft, man, the quarterback talent is incredible. I'm not so sure that Shedeur Sanders is lower than 3rd. He might be in a battle, in my view, with Drake May as the second best quarterback in this upcoming draft. Now, here's the thing. He knows one head coach his entire football life, and that is his dad. He's played with him in the youth level. Played for him in the youth level, the high school level, Jackson State, now Colorado. He's a junior. Does he decide to stay another year? Obviously, to stay with his dad, Deion, to refine his skills, to continue to help Colorado make this climb to being one of the more respected programs, again, like that in college football. Maybe he does. Matter of fact, I'm kind of leaning that way. But if he comes out this year's draft, I think he's the 3rd best quarterback, worst case scenario. He might be 2nd above Drake May. This kid is making tough throws. He's mobile. Again, I thought Emmanuel Acho, who works for Fox Sports, he tweeted during the game, I thought he made a great point, that whenever Shedeur rolls out to his left or right, he's not looking to run. He's looking to make plays with his arm overwhelmingly outside the pocket. How many great quarterbacks in the NFL today can do that? Like that's something you got to have at the next level. Mahomes is obviously the best in the world at it. Justin Herbert is great at it. Aaron Rodgers in his prime was awesome at it. That's what you got to be able to do, and Shedeur does that in an elite level. You could say it's TCU or whatever. We've seen a lot of Big 12 quarterbacks torch, remember when Mahomes and Baker Mayfield went for like 70 points or whatever it was in that one game in 2016? Obviously, Baker didn't pan out into what many who loved him thought he would be. Mahomes is now the best quarterback on planet Earth. It's not a Big 12 thing. So, listen, I expect Nebraska to go on the road, beat Nebraska. Then they got Colorado State. They'll probably beat them as well and go to that big Oregon game on the road, 3-0. But they're 22nd ranked in the country. Deion has turned the program around. Shedeur Sanders is 100% an NFL quarterback. By the way, as far as Travis Hunter, I think he works as a defensive back more than a wide receiver. He's probably not going to play both sides of the ball the way he does at Colorado because NFL team's going to want to not overwhelm him with a workload. Because, the NFL, we understand it's a different level than college, but he almost gives me Richard Sherman vibes in the sense Richard Sherman, remember, was a receiver for a time there at Stanford, but he's very long, has a lot of range, has incredible instincts. I think Travis Hunter reminds me a lot of Richard Sherman as a corner, so I think he would work at that level as well. But props to Colorado. obviously, the thing I was most happy about over the weekend was Tennessee, taking care of business against Virginia, the Vol View, on Friday at 6:30 Eastern. Tune in for that. But the second thing, to see Colorado do what they did, was wonderful. I love, for all those who went at Deion and who have gone at Deion for a long time, hold this. And for those that don't think Shedeur Sanders is an NFL quarterback or a first-round talent or whatever, you obviously didn't watch that game on Saturday. He was spectacular. In case you're wondering, by the way, the third best thing I saw over the weekend, or extended weekend with it being Labor Day, was Clemson getting blown up by Duke. But that's not my business. Don't even know why I brought that up. But I loved it, though. Okay, so, by the way, everybody feel free to chime in the comments. By the way, and let me check. Let me check and make sure that this is the case, because I don't want to give you guys any inaccurate information. That is not what we do. Listen, I'm an opinion show, but that doesn't mean I have to be wrong in terms of the factual information. Okay, so Carving It Up, we're at 1 on YouTube. On the Carving It Up YouTube channel, we are at 199 subscribers. We are one away, just one away from 200. So if we could, let's set a goal here. If we could get to 200 subscribers by the end of the show, so we probably got another 45 minutes to an hour, something like that. We got some big segments. We got Carving Up the Context in a couple of segments from now. And then after that, we've got the news segment, Bryson's Best 10 best teams in the NFL, and then finally Lions versus Chiefs to predict that game. So if you haven't subscribed, you can be that 200 subscriber. If you haven't subscribed, or if you have subscribed, hit somebody up that maybe hasn't subscribed. Tell them, hey, as I say, take 2 seconds out of your day, hit the big red subscribe button. Let's get to 200 before the show's over. How about we do that? 200 before the show's over, and that'd be good. That'd be a fun, nice celebration on the show today. So if you haven't subscribed, if you be the 200th, we would obviously we greatly appreciate you on the show. If you know somebody who hasn't subscribed, hit them up. Tell them to subscribe to Carving It Up. Let's get to 200 before this show is concluded. Let's move to Sean Payton, though, because, man, actually, it looks like we have a comment here from Philip Chenal. Philip says, ouch, salt in the wound for Clemson, but we are not good this year. Whoa, we need to fire Dabo Swinney. He isn't transitioning into the future like great college culture. You know what? Good for you, Philip, and good for you for saying something that frankly needs to be said. By the way, Clemson was 9th, I think, in the country. They dropped to 25th. That's a little disrespectful. Duke is solid. Listen, Duke's not competing for any championships or anything, but Duke's solid. Their quarterback is excellent. By the way, I actually think Clemson's quarterback is, I like Klubnik. Again, he's not even the same category as some of the quarterbacks I mentioned earlier. But, but you're right, Dabo, one thing that I'll put Philip's comment back up here. I think what Philip is referring to, and I think he's 100% right on, is the fact that to win today in college football, you got to embrace 2 things. You got to recruit, obviously, but you got to embrace 2 things. NIL, the transfer portal. Dabo hasn't embraced either. Matter of fact, he's kind of stiff-armed both. Do you remember he had a comment years ago? What was this, in 2016, 2017? It was right when Clemson was in the middle of their run. When they went from Deshaun Watson and then to Trevor Lawrence, they were in this incredible success. They're playing Alabama every year. And Dabo Swinney had a comment along the lines of, I'll retire from coaching when players get paid, which I remember actually talking about that on my show. Not at the time, because I don't think I had a show at the time. But when that happened, saying like, you got to be kidding me. Like, are you the ones paying him, Dabo? It's not coming out of your pocket? What are you getting paid, $12 million a year? $15 million, whatever Clemson's paying him? Come on, man. Getting paid freaking 8 figures. Well, you're not paying these players. He stiff-armed the NIL. He stiff-armed NIL. He stiff-armed the transfer portal. It's caught up to him. Clemson, fun fact, has lost 3 of their last 4 games. So, Philip, and Philip's a Clemson fan, by the way. If this season goes the way it's continuing to go, if Clemson finishes, by the way, the ACC is not very good. I'd say among the Power 5 conferences, it's probably worse. I think the Big Ten isn't that good, but Michigan's amazing. Ohio State, while I don't really buy into them this year, is great. And Penn State's good. I think the ACC is probably the worst among the Power 5 conferences, and I don't think it's particularly close. So, if Clemson goes 8-4, you think Dabo's gone? I mean, listen, Clemson is a respected program. It's not like they won't have suitors. I don't know. Long as they don't recruit Josh Heupel. Of course, Josh Heupel in Tennessee. Did Josh Heupel beat Clemson? What are we talking about? Again, the Vol View tomorrow at 6:30 Eastern at 3:30 Pacific time every weekday. Every Friday on the show. So now let's talk about Sean Payton. Because according to ESPN, man, he really got into Russell Wilson's craw here. So, according to ESPN, Sean Payton, head coach of the Broncos, told his quarterback, Russell Wilson, quote, that he needed to stop focusing so much on Russell Incorporated. He went on to say, quote, will you effing stop kissing all the babies? You're not running for public office. Well, listen, this is where I think the misinterpretation, and then I'll get into my larger point, but this is where I think the misinterpretation of Sean Payton getting hired by Denver really kind of comes to light here. A lot of folks talked about, and even I've been guilty of this, I'm not going to be holier than thou, that Sean Payton was hired by the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton went to the Denver Broncos to fix Russell Wilson. Who has a shorter leash? If you're a Broncos fan, if you're a Broncos fan out there, who do you see as more likely to be in the Broncos' long-term plans? The surefire first ballot Hall of Fame coach, one of the 5 best offensive coaches in football. By the way, is known for being a quarterback whisperer. Remember his last year in New Orleans, we don't give this enough love. Everybody talks about, hey, Drew Brees was breaking all these records. By the way, Drew Brees' career looked to be in the tank before Sean Payton got a hold of him in New Orleans, and they, of course, were very successful together, won a Super Bowl. But his last year in New Orleans, Sean Payton had Jameis Winston. He had Taysom Hill. He had, was it Ian Book? I remember Ian Book played at Notre Dame. Ian Book started at quarterback that season. There was someone else who started at quarterback for the Saints that year whose name slips my mind at this particular juncture. But it was quarterback carousel, and the Saints almost made the playoffs. It took the 49ers making an incredible comeback in Week 18 against the Rams, who eventually won the Super Bowl that year, for the Saints to miss the playoffs. So Sean Payton's an awesome coach. By the way, he left the Saints, and the Saints were 7-10. So it goes to show you a lot of things right there. But despite having a solid roster, by the way. But my larger point is this, and it's sort of the misinterpretation of why he was hired, I think, goes into my larger point. That there's a reason. I think the great Colin Cowherd has a great saying. He has a lot of great sayings, but one of his best is that when stuff leaks, there's a reason it happens. Stuff gets out because people want it out. And do you think that this got out to the media without Sean Payton knowing? You think Sean Payton didn't have a little bit of a say in this? Sean Payton is essentially saying, if this season goes awry, and by the way, it hasn't been the greatest month for the Denver Broncos. They lost Tim Patrick for the season. Jerry Jeudy's dealing with an injury. I think Cortland Sutton's a little bit beat up. The offensive line, while it has improved in the offseason, is a little And who knows if the defense can replicate what they did a year ago, keeping them in virtually all of these games. The problem was the offense, the quarterback and the head coach were incompetent, so they couldn't win these football games a year ago. Sean Payton is putting it out there, and I think he has multiple times this offseason that if this season goes haywire, if we end up 7-10, I had the Broncos at 8-9. I think they'll have some. I think Russell will be better than he was last year. Again, though, it's hard not to be better than being maybe the worst quarterback in the league along with Mac Jones. And I think Russell Wilson, talent-wise, is significantly better than Mac Jones. But if this season goes haywire, Sean Payton could say, hey, it's not me. I've been successful in New Orleans with a lot of quarterbacks. I took a 6-foot guy who had a beat-up shoulder and won the Super Bowl with him 3 years later. So if I can't fix Russell Wilson, then guys, nobody can fix Mr. Unlimited, as he dubbed himself a few years back. And I think this also goes to a point that when you talk about Denver and you talk about what they hope to accomplish this season, this is not a championship contending roster, even if it had, Justin Herbert, who I love, obviously. I think even if you put Justin Herbert in this Broncos team, they'd be a lot to make the playoffs. They'd be a threat to Kansas City, potentially, to win the division. I still don't see it as a championship-level roster. I overestimated it clearly last year when I picked them to go win the Super Bowl. But is this locker room, given the stuff we've heard from Sean Payton, given the rumblings we've heard from Broncos teammates there, given the body language is very important. Remember how many times last year where offensive skill position players would show up, Russ, either publicly or very subtly, even defensive players. So first one that comes to my mind is when, as far as skill position players, remember that probably the worst football game I've ever watched was last year. It was the Colts and the Broncos. The Colts won the game 12-9, and of course, it had to go to overtime as the Thursday night game was awful. And Russell Wilson throws a pass. KJ Hamler, I think, was the receiver's name. KJ Hamler's wide open in the end zone. Russell doesn't even look his way. Throws it, I forget, it was either to Judy or Cortland Sutton, and the game ends. Could have had KJ Hamler for the game-winning touchdown. Didn't even look his way. Completely missed his read. And KJ Hamler, game's over, takes his helmet off, and slams it on the grass there in Denver in frustration. Remember other games, it might have been the same game, where Melvin Gordon, who wasn't with the Broncos very long, but Russell Wilson sitting there. Remember that meme? He's got the jacket on, he's drinking some Gatorade, and Melvin Gordon walks by and gives him that side eye like, man, if we just had a quarterback, we'd be freaking amazing right now. And then there was a game, I think it was against Carolina. Yeah, it was against Carolina or it was against Tennessee, one of those two. Somewhere here in the South. And Russell goes to the sideline, and one of the defensive linemen for Denver is just screaming in his face. God knows what is coming out of there. And Russell almost goes into and this is what I've criticized with Russ, I don't know if he's, and maybe I should have caught this years ago. I should have. There's a little bit of inauthenticity there that I think the teammates saw through. That guys in Seattle, if you ever heard Richard Sherman or Marshawn Lynch, who's been easier than Sherm, but guys have talked about, KJ Wright talked about, former linebacker for the Seahawks. Guys in Seattle talk about in the past, and Pete Carroll's even alluded to this, that Russell's not the teammate you think he is. He's just kind of putting on a face for the masses. And by the way, I'm not saying Russ is a bad person. I have no evidence to say that he's a bad human being. I certainly don't want to cast aspersions in terms of his character. I don't ever want to do that. But there's a level of kind of fake there. It's not just corny. Kirk Cousins is corny. There's a lot of athletes out there, a lot of quarterbacks out there that are kind of corny. Jared Goff's kind of corny. That's okay. His teammates seem to buy into both. I mean, Kirk Cousins' teammates love him. Love him. Because he's real. Is Russell Wilson. Teammates in Seattle had questions. Teammates in Denver clearly had questions. And now does the new head coach, Sean Payton, have questions. The bad part for Denver is that we talk about, there's a lot of quarterbacks with pressure on them this year. We talk about Justin Fields and Tua and Dak, and some of these guys have a lot of pressure on their shoulders. And Russ is in that conversation as well. How does Denver move off of him? Because Russ hasn't even gotten into that contract. Isn't it 5 years? The 5-year extension he signed before he played a snap as a Denver Bronco? And here's the Denver Broncos where this is the last year of Russ's Seattle contract. The Denver contract hasn't even kicked in yet. And so if Russ goes haywire, if the Broncos season goes into the dumpster, which it has a potential to, there's a lot of tough opponents on that schedule, then what do they do? Because Sean Payton can go to the front office and say, guys, it's not me. Look at my track record. Russell had Nathaniel Hackett, who was an in-over-his-head head coach, had to hire a clock manager within 2 weeks of the season. We understand that. In over his head. So the Russell defenders could say, hey, some of this is on Russ, but some of this is he goes from Pete Carroll to Nat Hackett. That's a pretty big decline from head coach to head coach. Okay, fine. You'll go from one Hall of Fame coach, Carroll, to an in-over-his-head guy, to another Hall of Fame head coach who coaches your side of the ball, offense. Now there's no excuses. I don't know. I saw that comment from Sean Payton, and remember too when Sean Payton was hired by the Broncos? And then we'll move on. When he was doing his press conference, and a media member asked him, because there had been stories last year about how Russell Wilson had his own office, had all of these, the organization completely catered to his every desire. And Sean Payton said, yeah, we won't be doing that here. And that was it. That's all he said. And I remember talking about on the show, ooh, boy, this could get interesting. Sean Payton's kind of, he's an offensive coach, but he's still kind of old school. I mean, he was in the Bill Parcells tree. He was in Dallas with Bill Parcells before he got the Saints job. So he comes from that old guard of coaches in terms of how he manages his players and whatnot. So I'm curious to see this. Denver's going to be a team to watch this year. By the way, listen, I'll predict week 1 later on Friday. I'll predict tomorrow night's game later tonight. Cannot wait. Lions-Chiefs. That's going to be a good one. Chiefs, by the way, 4.5-point favorites. But Denver starts at home. Let me check. Yeah, they start at home against the Las Vegas Raiders. They're only a 3.5-point favorite. I feel like I think they got a more talented roster and certainly a better head coach than the Raiders do. Of course, as we sit here today, it would appear that there are certain limitations to their quarterbacks with Jimmy G and Russell Wilson. I think Russell's more talented than Jimmy, but obviously there's a certain level of stuff there in terms of what he's able to do post Pete Carroll. By the way, see how upbeat and happy and jolly and kind of old Pete Carroll that you see in Seattle now? I mean, Pete Carroll's out here slinging the ball, and we make fun of it, but, the whole good vibes only thing. It's pretty good vibes in Seattle. I've got them making the playoffs. I don't have Denver getting there. I mean, last year was supposed to be a rebuilding year for the Seahawks. And they got in the postseason. Geno Smith was comeback player of the year. Geno Smith. Not Trevor Lawrence, not Lamar Jackson. Geno Smith. Just saying. Okay. By the way, again, a little reminder. We're at 199 subscribers on Carving It Up. One away from 200, so if we could get to 200 before the end of the show, if you haven't subscribed, we would greatly appreciate if you're the 200th. If you have subscribed, hit somebody up who hasn't. They could be the 200th subscriber, and we can give them a ton of love on this show. Maybe we can do a little something special for them. So 200 one away from 200 subscribers. So if you have subscribed, hit somebody else up who hasn't and ask them to subscribe. And if you haven't, man, 2 seconds. 2 seconds out of your day. Hit the subscribe button. You're done. You got 200. That easy. That's how it's done. By the way, I'm going to be on the Cowboys Cam Fin tonight. Very excited about that. I think the show will be like around 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. Cowboys Cam Fin here at the Grid. They do a phenomenal job covering, obviously, the Dallas Cowboys. I think they're going to like the fact that I have the Cowboys getting to the Super Bowl. So I'm very excited about that tonight. Okay. So I've introduced a lot of new segments lately. So I've got the newest one today with Bryson's Best 10. I promise it's not going to be every few weeks. Hey, new segment. No. We want to limit it. But Bryson's Best 10 in the next segment, my top 10 teams in the NFL coming into the season, and this will be a weekly segment, as all of these segments are. Introduced the Vol View last week, which is on Fridays at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific, so a half hour into the show. And then one I introduced, I guess it's now about a month ago, with Carving Up the Context. And man, this one, I saw this one over the weekend or on Monday, whenever it was. I'm like, yep, that's Carving Up the Context. I don't have no further questions asked, so let's not waste any time. Let's go and get into the theme song. Here we go. Okay, so I want to preface all of my comments on this segment that I love so much with this individual I'm going to be talking primarily about. I have an immense amount of respect for Rich Paul. Rich Paul, who is, of course, close friend of LeBron James, who is really the power agent of the NBA with Clutch Sports, has a number of clients, of course, the first being the king himself. But a lot of folks attack Rich Paul like, oh, you only got the job because you're friends with LeBron. No. He put in the work. He put in the hard hours of working to become one of the best agents in the NBA. He's not just somebody flying by the seat of his pants and LeBron gave him the job, but really LeBron does the... No. Rich Paul is as real agent of an agent as there is in the NBA and deserves all the love and the respect in the world and admiration that he gets. I want that to be as clear as day. But he was on Gilbert. By the way, Gilbert Arenas is getting some... he's strong. Gilbert Arenas has said some crazy things in the past, but he's getting everybody to really be open and honest on a show, which I guess that's the mark of any great interview is trying to dig beneath the surface. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But he was on by the way, the show is called Gil's Arena. It's what the podcast is called. And Rich Paul was on there. And he was asked, and everybody on that show was asked, how legit is the Lakers bubble ring? Of course, remember back to 2020, during COVID, the NBA was played in some empty gyms in Walt Disney World at the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex. And they were asked, and there's been a lot of it's an asterisk next to the championship. But that's, by the way, a narrative for the record. Even as a Warriors fan, I've said is crazy. I mean, if you know anything about the bubble, you know that almost cursed there. That stuff was brutal. Brutal in the bubble. They were away from their families. Again, people talk about, there were no road games. Yeah, there was also no home games. You know, sometimes the playoffs, if it's a Game 6, the Western Conference Finals or Eastern Conference Finals, sometimes you are tired, you are beat up. You got to rely on the momentum and the energy of that crowd. They didn't have that. They had the artificial crowd. And they were away from their families for the vast majority of the time. The Lakers and the Heat, of course, the Lakers persevered and won the title. So I think it's a crazy narrative. But Rich Paul's asked, how legit is the Lakers championship? Bubble championship in 2020. He responds, quote, if Steph wins in the bubble, do they discredit it? No, they don't. End quote. That's all he said. Okay, so before I even get to the Steph aspect of this, I'm, and this is away from the carving up the context part that I just want to dive into very briefly. We know for a fact that LeBron and Steph have a mutual respect. I don't think they're friends. Kind of like we talk about LeBron and Steph are like the new Magic and Bird in terms of like the player rivalry. Magic and Bird were and still are like genuine close friends. So it was like a friendly rivalry. With Steph and LeBron, I don't think they're friends, but they're certainly on far better terms now than they were, say, in 2016 when there was some legit animosity between the two. They have Steph and Bron speak very highly of one another. LeBron was even asked on the shop a year and a half ago, if there's any player in the NBA you'd want to play with, who would that be? He said Steph Curry. Didn't hesitate, didn't think, no, he said Steph Curry. He said something like, you gotta guard him in the parking lot. Like, he loves Steph. Steph loves LeBron. There's mutual respect there. But you have Rich Paul saying this. By the way, 2 years ago, Maverick Carter, someone else I have immense respect for, LeBron's entire inner circle I do. But Maverick Carter 2 years ago was talking about Steph and Steph's defense, something that's been mercilessly attacked over Steph's career. Maverick Carter said during a podcast in 2021, quote, Steph can't guard. I'm 38 and haven't played a decent game of basketball in probably 18 years since I was 20. Steph would have trouble guarding me. Okay, that is, again, watch Steph for about 5 seconds on defense, and, that's, clearly not the case. I'm not going to sit up here and act like Steph is freaking Tony Allen or Gary Payton or somebody, but the guy's a darn good defender for his size. Definitely holds his own in that regard. He's actually made some big defensive plays in the playoffs. Remember, he blocked John Morant 2 years ago, but that's another conversation for another day. But to get to Rich Paul's comment, hey, Steph Curry would have gotten the credit for winning the bubble in 2020 that LeBron did not. Okay. His reasoning for this is, I'm drawing a blank. Because Steph Curry in 2017 and in 2018 won back-to-back championships. I argue strongly that the second championship, the 2018 title, he deserved Finals MVP over the guy that won it. He's with Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant, who's universally regarded as one of the 5 best players in the world, worst case scenario. At that point, it was a conversation. Hey, who's the best? Is it Steph? I'm sorry, is it LeBron or is it KD? There's a real discussion back around 2018. I still think Steph was better than KD at that point, but that's neither here nor there. We took credit away from Steph for 2017 and 18. By the way, both of those series, he averaged over 25 points a game, was efficient in doing so. 2017, he darn near averaged a triple-double. In 2018, outscored KD in 3 of the 4 games. We're like, no, he's just a role player. Kevin Durant's the driver of that bus, and Draymond Green's the best defensive player in the league, and Klay Thompson is criminally underrated. Can't forget about Klay Thompson. And here's Steph Curry. It doesn't bother him. Steph's the most selfless player in the league, most selfless team in that league. He's like, I'll let KD get a shine. If it means I get rings, let KD do his thing. Even absent KD, folks, we don't give Steph credit for 2015 with no Kevin Durant. Why? Cavs were beat up. Kyrie Irving was gone. Kevin Love was gone. Andre Iguodala, to me, insanely, and I love Iggy, won Finals MVP. If it didn't go to Steph, it should have went to LeBron. LeBron was on another planet in that series. But if they're going to give it to the guy for the winning team, it should have been Steph. His averages in that series were actually better than they were in the regular season when he won league MVP. Whatever. It wasn't until he got his 4th championship they were like, oh yeah, Steph's pretty good. Steph's pretty good. He's pretty good. So Steph would have gotten love that LeBron didn't. Is this the same Steph Curry who we even broached the topic? Is Steph Curry better than Magic Johnson? No, how could you say such a thing? It's such a massive gap. Yeah, is Steph really even a point guard? I mean, but worst case scenario, 35% of basketball fans, maybe more, say, yeah, LeBron's the greatest basketball player ever. By the way, I fall into that category. I do think LeBron is the GOAT. But we dare mention A guy who has 4 titles, 2 MVPs, literally changed how a sport is played, has led the greatest dynasty since Jordan's Bulls, but it's outlandish to say he's in the conversation with Magic. I got Magic above Steph, but I've said if Steph wins another title, he absolutely passes Magic. His impact on the game, far greater than Magic. The teams he won championships with, aside from 2017, are either equal to Magic or in some cases, and especially 2022, far less than what Magic had. But that's another conversation for another day if you talk about Steph and Magic. But if you even broach the topic, you get destroyed on social media and on podcasts and whatnot. Rich Paul could have mentioned a number of stars. If they'd have won in the bubble, they'd have gotten credit. How about Kawhi Leonard? Remember Kawhi Leonard around 2020 was the darling of the NBA. Who's better, Kawhi or LeBron? I remember having conversations about that on my show at that time. If Kawhi would have led the Clippers to a championship, oh my God, Kawhi is the king of the NBA. He's the king of LA. Did he have to name drop Steph? Or was that strategic? Because he knows, like everybody else knows, that while LeBron is absolutely and unequivocally, historically, the better player, and I got Steph as the second best player in the world, LeBron's fourth, so they're still neck and neck. Steph's better today, but they're neck and neck. In terms of popularity since LeBron came to the league, the only guy that compares LeBron is Steph. The only guy who is, at least in the context of LeBron's popularity, in terms of LeBron being the face of the league, is Steph. Because he's relatable. Like LeBron, he's a family man. Like LeBron, he's incredibly generous in terms of his philanthropic efforts. And like LeBron, he's a face that is universally recognized worldwide. So, for Rich Paul to say this, by the way, is Rich Paul right that LeBron should have got more credit for the 2020 title? 1,000%. But to make the claim, Steph would have gotten all the love in the world. When he got his unanimous MVP, you say, well, he got a unanimous MVP, first ever. Remember the pushback from players when he got that unanimous MVP? And how passive-aggressive they were towards Steph? All of a sudden, they didn't love cute and cuddly Steph anymore. Steph didn't have a whole lot of allies in the NBA when that happened. Interesting. Interesting where Rich Paul took that. A lot of other superstars you could have mentioned. Kawhi, chief among them, in my view. But to act like Steph is just beloved by legions of NBA fans. Listen, does he get the hate LeBron gets? Not really, but he has one average game. People are all over him on social media. I mean, there was the narrative going to the 2022 finals, a comical narrative, really, that he was this playoff underachiever. Because he have a finals MVP, that disqualifies and disregards the other 3 championships. Who cares? He's just a shooter. Just a shooter. Rich Paul's dead wrong. So for carving up the context, Rich Paul, ask Steph and his camp if maybe they don't feel the same way that maybe LeBron would have gotten more love than Steph had. The legions of Steph haters, folks, is a very, very real thing. I mean, the people talking about, this guy's more skilled and this guy's better. I mean, there was a time in which people thought Russell Westbrook was a player than Steph Curry about 5-6 years ago. Okay. All right. So for carving up the context, that's what I got. Rich Paul out here acting like Steph is just universally beloved. As if we don't talk about LeBron and Jordan, but if you mention Steph and Magic, oh God, oh you can't broach that. Okay. By the way, if you are a LeBron defender and supporter, which I am, I'm very calculated. I don't call myself a LeBron fan because if you say LeBron fan, that often puts you in the category of people who it's kind of like Jordan fans. He never missed a shot. Some of the finals losses, some of the finals which LeBron, for the record, didn't play that well in. 2011, chief among them. 2014, his numbers look good, but they were a bunch of empty stats. And when you really look at that series, people just act like it didn't happen. Listen, I think that's part of what makes players great is that they bounce back from tough moments in big spots in the playoffs. I mean, they called Magic Johnson Tragic Johnson in 1984, and he came back. Didn't the Lakers win that next year in 85? That's what makes sports great, is bouncing back from adversity. Okay, so again, we've got three special segments on Carving It Up Live throughout the show today. Again, let's give a little check right here. Okay, so we're still at 199 subscribers. So again, if we're setting a goal, if we could get to 200 by the end of the show, if you have subscribed, tell somebody who hasn't to subscribe to the show to be number 200. We would greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed, hey, you can be the 200th. Hit the big red subscribe button. Takes 2 seconds, as I say at the end of every show. That'd be really cool if we could get to 200 by the end of today's show. It'd be very, very exciting. All right. So, another new segment. This has become a theme on this show lately, but I always got to shake it up a little bit. A new segment to Carving It Up Live that we are introducing. So, you hear a lot of power rankings during the NFL season and tiers and top 10s and all this. So I'm like, hey, why don't I do this? You know, it seems to be quite popular. People seem to enjoy this, so let's do it. Let's rebrand it Carving It Up style. So, I'm pleased to introduce a very new segment to Carving It Up Live called Bryson's Best 10. The best 10 teams in the NFL. If we can get some background music going right now. Hang on. Let's see what we got. We got the background music playing right now to go for Bryson's Best 10. At number 10, the 10th best team in the NFL is my Pittsburgh Steelers. 100%. The Steelers are the 10th best team in the National Football League, and here's why. They've got a young quarterback going into year 2. Historically, quarterbacks who have subpar to average to, in some cases, awful year 1s, your rookie years tend to go into year 2, playing great football. I predicted Kenny Pickett goes for 28 touchdowns this season, but even absent Kenny Pickett, this is a really good roster. You've got TJ Watt, who I think is one of the 5 best football players on the planet. I think he's going to break Strahan's sack record this season. He's the best pass rusher in football, bar none, even with Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, just got paid today, Micah Parsons. That's your guy, TJ Watt. You've got an excellent linebacking core in the secondary. You've got guys like Joey Porter, who's going to have a big rookie season. You've got Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's one of the established best safeties in the NFL. Patrick Peterson's a great veteran corner for them. And then offensively, Najee Harris has been a reliable running back. George Pickens, who's shown flashes to be a superstar wide receiver in the NFL, is going to have a big season. Deontay Johnson, one of the better number 2, number 3 receivers in the NFL, is there as well. They added Allen Robinson in more of a supporting role than he was with the Los Angeles Rams, so he'll fit there better. All that's top it off. They've got a top 5 coach in football, Mike Tomlin, who historically, famously, has never had a losing season in his life in the National Football League. So I think that should be taken into consideration when we talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're going to go 11-6. Again, a lot of this first top 10, the initial top 10, is pure speculation. Of course, we'll have a lot more data and evidence going to week 2, but that's where I've got the Pittsburgh Steelers, my Steelers, the 10th best team in the NFL. At number 9, it is the New York Football Jets. Never thought I'd be saying those words coming in week 1 of the 2023 season, 12 months ago, but here we are. They add Aaron Rodgers, who, again, comes off of an average year. If we could put up, I think we still have the graphic, the numbers in 2022, career worst in almost every category this past season. Has not had a 300-yard passing game since week 14 of the 2021 season. However, you can make the case, hey, he was injured last year. There was some internal stuff in Green Bay. Now, fresh start, New York. He's embraced the culture. Defense is excellent. I don't think they're going to be the 85 Bears, as DJ Reed suggested. I think that's a bit too far. He even suggested 2013 Legion of Boom. They'll be excellent. They won't be that good. But offensively, you have Garrett Wilson, who in my view is going to be the Offensive Player of the Year. Have over 1,500, 1,600 yards, double-digit touchdowns. It's going to be very similar to what Cooper Kupp, the connection he had with Matthew Stafford back in 2021 when Stafford became the Rams quarterback. That's what you're going to see with the Jets. They have Breece Hall. They have Dalvin Cook. Literally the only reason they're not higher, because I like Saleh too as a head coach, the only reason they're not higher is their offensive line truly concerns me, and in my view is the difference between them being a contender and being a playoff team, which I have them as a playoff team. I have them winning the AFC East, which isn't as good as some may suggest, but the Jets are the 9th best team in the NFL. The 8th best team, and some may think this is low, but I've got the Philadelphia Eagles, the 8th best team in the NFL, and here's why. Listen, they lost both of their coordinators. They've lost multiple starters on defense last year. And by the way, a defense that was excellent against terrible quarterbacks, mostly. Again, Trevor Lawrence is the one outlier. I think it was week 4 last year. They played great against Trevor. But anytime they played a good quarterback in the NFL, man, they've struggled. Good to great. Remember when they played Dak Prescott, who I consider to be a great quarterback, the 8th best in the league to be exact? Remember they played Dak, had a 10-0 lead in part because of Dak. Remember Dak threw that pick 6 to sweat the defensive end, and Philly's up 10-0. They're feeling good about themselves. And then Dak sits back in his rocking chair, drops 40 on him, 400 yards passing, and has one of the best games of his season last year on Philadelphia. Mahomes had a perfect passer rating. If it wasn't perfect, it was darn close. In the second half, scored every single drive of the second half against the Philadelphia Eagles. They could not stop the man. Even Cincinnati, even Jacksonville had their moments against Patrick Mahomes. In all those games as well, he was injured. So when they play great, too, in the case of Mahomes, awesome quarterbacks, they struggle. Now, the upside for Philly, Jalen Hurts to me is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, and I think he's going to get better. A.J. Brown's still a great number 1. Devontae Smith a great number 2. Goddard's a solid tight end, and the offensive line is still top 3 in football. I think Nick Sirianni isn't as good as people give him credit for, but I think he's a type of coach kind of as he delegates responsibilities to others. He understands where his limitations are. Some might criticize him for that. I actually praise him. He's not a type of guy to be in over his head, so I give the Philadelphia Eagles credit. They are the 8th best team in the NFL. I do think they win 12 games this season, but they fall short in the divisional round, I think, to the Dallas Cowboys. But Philly's due for another big-time regular season. At number 7, I love this team. The Detroit Lions. The kneecap biters. If we have the soundbite of that we play every time when the Detroit Lions win, here we go. What do you say about Dan Campbell and Oprah?
Kneecap. 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 Kneecap.
A lot of kneecaps will be bitten this season in Detroit with the Detroit Lions this season. Dan Campbell, I was brutal on the hire initially 2 years ago. 2 years later, I love him. He's built a culture. His players play their tails off for him. They've got a tremendous offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. Jared Goff's coming off of one of the best seasons of his career. Amon-Ra St. Brown's a great number 1. They drafted Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama, who I love. I think he's the second coming of Alvin Kamara. It's so similar. His game is so similar. And really, what got Detroit last year, the difference between the Lions winning 9 games, which they did a year ago, and probably 12 games, their defense. Their offense was incredible. Their offensive line is top 5 in the league. Their defense was a huge problem, one of the worst scoring defenses in football. They addressed it in the draft. They addressed it in free agency, particularly in the secondary, adding Emmanuel Mosley and Cam Sutton, 2 Tennessee guys, by the way. Go Vols. So they addressed the defense. They got Aiden Hutchinson coming back for year 2 with the potential to have a big-time second year really jump for him. So to me, Detroit, I've said all offseason long, since the draft, they're going to be in the NFC Championship game. I'm just telling y'all before it happens. Detroit, the 7th best team in the NFL. To number 6, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I think also will make their conference championship game, but I think the roster isn't quite what the other teams above them are. But I still believe Trevor Lawrence is the 3rd best quarterback in football. His second half stats would tell you just that. Again, aside from Mahomes and Burrow, he was arguably the best quarterback in football. If you look at the numbers, if you look at especially fourth quarter production, a lot of game-winning drives or game-tying drives in some of these games. He had the 27-0 comeback against the Chargers in the playoffs. He was remarkable. Big thing for the Jaguars, though. They get Calvin Ridley. If you think about what Calvin Ridley did in Atlanta, had the year off, obviously suspended due to the gambling situation. Man, if you've seen tape from Calvin Ridley in Jack's training camp, he about to have a big old year as Trevor Lawrence is number 1. They still have Christian Kirk. They still have Evan Ingram as their tight end. Offensive line will improve. Defense, youth, inexperience, they'll be better this year. Doug Peterson's still an excellent head coach. Won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles against Tom Brady just 5 years ago. So a lot of some championship experience in Jacksonville. A lot of young players who have all the potential of the world to build a championship contending team for years to come. But it starts with their quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. Will have the Jaguars in the AFC Championship game. I've got them right now, though, as the 6th best team in football. Now to the top 5. At number 5, the Dallas Cowboys. I've got Dallas at number 5. There's simply not that many. Again, I don't think Dallas is great in a lot of areas. Now, defensive line, I think is excellent with Micah Parsons. Secondary, I'd say the secondaries might be the strength of their team because they've got Trayvon Diggs, they've got Stephon Gilmore, Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson. I mean, they've got some excellent players in the secondary for Dallas. Obviously, some solid linebackers as well. And we know Dan Quinn is the defensive coordinator, former head coach, runs the defense. Offensively, Dak Prescott looks to bounce back from a tough year in terms of interceptions. I thought he was much better than people give him credit for. Some third-level stats would tell you just that. And plus the eye test would do that as well. But you have CeeDee Lamb, who's coming off an over 1,000-yard season, really proved himself to be a number one wide receiver. You got Brandon Cooks, who's been successful in just about every system he's been in. The question I have for Cooks is, can he stay healthy? You knock on wood for Dallas that he does. You have Tony Pollard, who had a big season last year. You had Deuce Vaughn in the draft, who I think he's going to be like a Darren Sproles type role for him. Michael Gallup's a solid wide receiver. Now, the tight end group concerns me a little bit, and the offensive line, similar to the Jets, definitely concerns me. It's not as bad as the Jets. You do have Zach Martin, you do have Terrence Steele, but there are some holes, particularly at center, in the Cowboys' offensive line. But if you look at what Dak's last healthy season, we're talking about a 37-touchdown, 4,500-yard guy leading the Cowboys to the best offensive football. You have the albatross that was around Dak's neck, being Kellen Moore, gone. You have Mike McCarthy, who's going to play into Dak's strengths better. The Cowboys are the 5th best team in the NFL, and I have them going to the Super Bowl this season. At number 4, though, the Baltimore Ravens, who I think just have a better overall roster, and with all due respect to Mike McCarthy, I think John Harbaugh I think we would all agree, is a better coach. Listen, I had the toughest playoff game or potential playoff game when I did my predictions on Monday with Ryan. The toughest one to predict was a potential Baltimore and Jacksonville game, because I think Baltimore's roster is significantly better than Jacksonville's. I just think Jacksonville has an all-world quarterback and just as good of a coach as Baltimore does. But if you look at the roster, Lamar Jackson has the best set of skill position players he's ever had in his career, and it's not even close. Going into year 6 with his new contract, you got Zay Flowers they drafted out of Boston College, you got Odell Beckham, you got Mark Andrews, you got J.K. Dobbins in the backfield. Great offensive line. You got an excellent defense. Secondary concerns me a little bit, but a great defense, great front 7 in particular to back him up. Justin Tucker, we know, is the best kicker in NFL history, in my view, and is certainly still the best kicker in football, so their special teams are good. So they upgraded offensive coordinator. They upgraded at weapons. O-line and running game is still good. Tight end is still excellent. The question for the Ravens is, can Lamar stay healthy? If he does, I think they're a 12-win team. I think they win a playoff game, and I think they're talented enough to get to the AFC title game, so the Ravens to be the 3rd best team in football. But the team in their division that will win their division, I think is better today, is the Cincinnati Bengals, who I think are the 3rd best team in the National Football League. I've got Cincinnati at number 3 for this reason. Joe Burrow, and this is even absent if Joe Burrow is going to play or not, but it looks like, according to all accounts, including Burrow himself, he's going to be ready for that Week 1 game against Cleveland, which is huge for Cincinnati, obviously. You still have T. Higgins, you still have Jamar Chase, you still have Joe Mixon, by the way. To me, the biggest, I should say, the least reported offseason acquisition, so to speak, for the Cincinnati Bengals, Orlando Brown, who they stole from the Kansas City Chiefs. Orlando Brown was Mahomes' left tackle, excellent player. He's now in Cincinnati now. They've really struggled with the left tackle. They've had Jonah Williams. They've had a couple other guys. Some real injuries to the offensive line has kind of plagued Cincinnati in both of their last 2 playoff losses. So they're saying, look, if we get beat in the playoffs, it's not going to be for the reasons it has been the last 2 years in terms of we're going to keep Burrow upright. He's great with the football in terms of making decisions. By the way, I think Cincinnati, albeit they lost both of their starting safeties, concerns me a little bit. Chidobe Awuzie is coming off of an injury, but their front 4 is excellent. Special teams is good. Listen, when you have the 2nd best quarterback in football, sky's the limit, and Cincinnati certainly has that. I think they're the 3rd best team in the NFL. The best overall roster in the NFL I have at number 2, and that's the San Francisco 49ers. People talk about the weakness as quarterback, and I don't even think that's that much of a weakness. I'm a much bigger Brock Purdy believer than most are. Again, in these games that he started and finished, not only did he win them all, he led the league in passer rating. So when he took over for Jimmy Garoppolo, everybody was like, oh, it's over for San Francisco. And yours truly sat in this seat right here. Said, no. I don't know. It's something I like about this Brock Purdy kid. He comes out against Tampa Bay, vastly outduels the greatest quarterback ever, Tom Brady. And I come in the next day on Monday and say, sturdy Brock Purdy is the man. He's mobile. Arm leaves some to be desired, but he's accurate. He plays great within the Kyle Shanahan system. And then after that is as loaded a roster as we've seen in some time. Offensive line is awesome. They have a future first ballot Hall of Famer at left tackle. And Trent Williams. They have Deebo Samuel. They have George Kittle. They have Christian McCaffrey. They have Brandon Ayuk. Defensively, Nick Bosa, congrats to him, just signed the richest deal of any player in NFL history. He got paid today, 5 years, $170 million. Congrats to him. One of the best pass rushers in football. Fred Warner, best linebacker in football. Drake Greenlaw, top 10 linebacker in football. Eric Armstead in the interior defensive line. Tremendous Pro Bowl level guy. Talanoa Hufanga, by the way, who trains with Troy Polamalu. I knew I liked Hufanga. I knew I liked him. Okay? A great player in the secondary at safety. Where is their weakness? Kyle Shanahan is one of the 5 best coaches of football. Where is their weakness as a roster? So, I think Detroit's going to take them out because I think Detroit matches up well against them. Plus, I have to continue and follow through on my promise because I think the Lions are going to get to the conference title game. But top to bottom of the roster, the only thing that scares me with the Niners, every other year, man, injuries really, really plague them. And knock on wood for them. For their sake, they stay healthy. But I think that's what gets them in the long run. But today, as we sit here, week 1, that's the best roster in the NFL. I just shouldn't say it's not close. But there's a solid gap between them and whoever's number 2. That leaves the obvious number 1. It's the Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning, defending Super Bowl champions who will play tomorrow, and I'll predict their game in just a moment. Listen, Mahomes, that goes without saying, he's the greatest quarterback on the face of the earth. I think he's the 4th greatest quarterback ever already. Only guys that I have above him are Brady, Montana, and Manning. I think with a title, he potentially passes Manning, given Manning's, and I love Peyton, but given Manning's postseason resume, Mahomes is one of the greatest postseason quarterbacks ever. You consider the fact he maybe has the best arm in the league, incredibly accurate, is the best playmaker we've ever seen at the quarterback position, and not to mention Andy Reid, who's probably the greatest offensive mind since Bill Walsh. You got him a head coach. Now Travis Kelce, by the way, according to his brother Jason Kelce, may actually play tomorrow, which is, I don't know if I'd risk that if I were Kansas City or Kelce, especially get 10 days off after this game before week 2, but be that as it may, Travis Kelce's one of the best tight ends of all time. Chris Jones, who's not back yet, but when he is back, which is worst case by week 8, according to him, one of the best, if not the best interior defensive lineman with respect to Aaron Donald in the NFL. Great offensive line. Again, people are poo-pooing Kansas City's wideouts today. Sky Moore, I think, is going to have a breakout year. Kadarius Toney's going to be used as kind of like their gadget guy on offense. You still have Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who was good for you last season. So receiving core solid, especially with Reid and Mahomes. Defensively, they've been excellent in the playoffs the last couple of years, so I think that's going to be something that the Kansas City leans on from time to time with Chris Jones out. So I have no reason to have anybody else above Kansas City today. I think they're going to go back-to-back. Be the first team since Brady's Patriots to do so. So I got Kansas City at number 10. There you go. Top 10, Bryson's best 10. Best 10 teams in the NFL. So we'll go over this one more time. 10 to 1. Number 10, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 9, the New York Jets. Number 8, the Philadelphia Eagles. Then at number 7, we've got the Detroit Lions. At number 6, the Jacksonville Jaguars. At 5, the Cowboys. 4, the Ravens. 3, the Bengals. 2, the 49ers. And at number 1, the reigning champion, Kansas City Chiefs. Last call before we get to our last segment. I just want to give this just a little quick look here. Okay, so still at 199 subscribers. So last call here. So again, our goal by the end of the show is to get to 200. So again, one more time, if you haven't subscribed to the show, please do so. If you could be the 200 subscriber, we would certainly appreciate it here at Carving It Up. If you have subscribed, hit somebody up who hasn't subscribed to the show yet, and we can get to 200. That'll be really cool to hopefully do this live on the show. We're obviously going to get to 200 certainly eventually, but if we could do this live on Carving It Up, that'd be pretty awesome. So just hit milestone after milestone on the show, and it's all thanks to you, the watcher and the listener. We greatly appreciate obviously your support of the show. So let's do something. Me, you, those watching, those listening. Let's do a little something fun here, okay? It'll be very relaxing. I feel like a yoga teacher right now. Everybody, take a deep breath. And then exhale. There's a football game on tomorrow in the National Football League between the Detroit Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs. The game counts toward both teams' overall records, win, lose, or draw. So without further ado, screw it, baby. Let's predict this sucker. Let's bring out the background music. The Kansas City Chiefs host the Detroit Lions. Man, is it good to say those words. Football's back. I know college football's back, and I love college football, but there's nothing like the NFL, which is the king of television, as we all know. So, Kansas City in this game, they were, throughout the offseason, from the time the schedule came out to about 3 days ago, they were 6.5. I even saw some sportsbooks having it 7.5 point favorites. But Kansas City now is down to a 4.5-point favorite. Obviously, a lot of it has to do with the fact that Chris Jones likely won't be there. I know Chris Jones was at a charity event today in Kansas City saying that there's a potential he might be back if maybe he signs a contract. He said he just wants a raise. The holdout seems to be going about as well, I guess, so to speak, as any holdout that I've seen. But Travis Kelce, too, is a big question mark for Kansas City. Will he be back? Will he be able to participate in this Week 1 matchup? Now, Andy Reid did not seem concerned at all. Kelce hyperextended his knee yesterday. That was a huge concern for Kansas City, but Andy Reid went to the media and said, hey, looks like he's going to be fine. And I think, to me, more importantly, because there's only so much a coach can and will say, Jason Kelce, we know, future Hall of Famer, center with the Philadelphia Eagles, Jason Kelce was doing an interview today saying that, hey, he's feeling good, and I think he's going to be good to go for tomorrow night's game against Detroit. So I don't think they should play Kelce, but there's nobody that knows his body better than Travis, and obviously with the Chiefs medical staff as well. I think he plays. Some of this is the fact that on the flip side of the coin, say that, hey, after this game, we get 10 days off. We got the 3 days before Sunday's games, and then we got a week after that before we go to Jacksonville to play the Jaguars. So I'll have plenty of time to rest my body, get ready for that game. Maybe not practice a whole lot next week, but sort of like low manage the knee throughout practice and then be ready to go on game day. So I think Kelce plays. So if you want to bet Kansas City, like now is the time to do it. Like if you're going to take Kansas City, go ahead and take them to cover right now because I think Travis Kelce's going to play. This is not if I were a betting man. We'll save that for Friday, but I think he's going to play tomorrow night. So for everybody else, listen, Detroit comes off of a season in which they were one of the best offenses in the NFL. Jared Goff was a Pro Bowler. They have a plethora of offensive playmakers. They just drafted one out of Alabama who I think is going to be excellent in Jahmyr Gibbs. They still have guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jamison Williams isn't there yet. He's got a 6-game suspension due to a gambling violation, so he'll be come back later this season. But they've got excellent offensive line play, led by Penei Sewell, who's one of the best tackles in the NFL. Ben Johnson's one of the great offensive coordinators of this league. So, listen, you're going to have, forgetting who's... I'm blanking. I know his name, but I'm blanking on who Kansas City's defensive coordinator is. But he's going to have his hands full with this Detroit Lions offense. It's going to be a problem this season, all season long. So I think even at Arrowhead, and there's been a lot of, I was on the 8 o'clock spot last night, which, by the way, check that out on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on The Grid, best game show in town. But you had Alfred Parsar Jr., one of our panelists, saying that, hey, Jared Goff is not great on the road. And not just that, Jared Goff is not great in big primetime pressurized games. I said, wait a minute now. I remember a time and place in which it was Jared Goff who made some clutch plays in that playoff game in the divisional round in 2018 to beat the Dallas Cowboys. I used to be a fan of the Cowboys back then. It broke my heart. The week after, went on the road to New Orleans. We can talk about the bad pass interference call or missed pass interference call that didn't occur. We understand that. But Jared Goff was down 3 under 2 minutes to go in the loudest environment in the NFL, went right down the field, led the Rams to a field goal to tie it, and then overtime after a pick, short field, led the Rams to a walk-off field goal to send them to the Super Bowl. So he has big game experience. By the way, went on the road to Lambeau in a game that we all thought, I shouldn't say we all thought, the masses, myself included, thought the Packers were going to beat Detroit, get in the playoffs, and Jared Goff comes in and outduels Aaron Rodgers in Lambeau, retires Aaron Rodgers as a Green Bay Packer. So he loves these big games. He understands, the significance of these. So for Kansas City, of course, they're as used to big games as anybody in the NFL. They have, after all, played in 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls, winning 2 of them. And I think they're the next budding dynasty in the NFL for years to come. So, the key to this game for me, is the fact that if you look at Patrick Mahomes' Week 1 stats in his career, they are unbelievable. This is his stat line from his first year as a starter in 2018 to last year's Week 1. So 2018, 256 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. 2019, 378, 3 touchdowns, no picks. 2020, 211, 3 touchdowns, no picks. 2021, 337, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Last year, 360, 5 touchdowns, no picks. So Mahomes does not turn the football over. Doesn't throw interceptions in Week 1. He's efficient. He's accurate. Throws for a lot of yards. I think Kelsey's going to be there. He's the best security blanket. Seems disrespectful to Travis Kelce, but he's the most reliable target, arguably, in the NFL. I think Detroit's going to make it close. It reminds me a lot of a situation. I actually attended this game 2 years ago, opening night in Tampa Bay. I was in the building that night. It was a blast. When the Tampa Bay Buccaneers came in that game, we thought they were going to destroy Dak and the Cowboys. Dak coming off the injury. Dak comes in, throws for 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, goes toe-to-toe with the GOAT, Tom Brady, and then Brady led a game-winning drive at the end. I think it's going to play out the exact same way. Detroit comes on the road. They understand the hype surrounding them. They understand the crazy environment that Arrowhead Stadium is going to be. They'll take the lead, and Mahomes will lead the Chiefs to a walk-off field goal. Kansas City wins this game. They do not cover. I would take Detroit plus 4.5, but Kansas City wins 30-28 against the Detroit Lions to open the NFL season in 2023. Mahomes does not lose on opening day, doesn't throw picks on opening day. I have no reason to believe that against a defense that will be trying to find itself to a certain extent, that he'll somehow just turn into a pumpkin or something, or struggle in that regard. So I think Kansas City wins in week 1 to start the NFL season, and 30-28 will be the final score. They'll beat the Detroit Lions and start 1-0. But for Detroit, this will be something to build off of going into week 2, and they will go to the NFC Championship game. So Kansas City wins. There you go. Let's see. We've got, hold on. Got a little something from, so Tom Brady, real quick, and then we'll get out of here. I just saw this come across my phone. So Tom Brady does his podcast, the Let's Go podcast with Jim Gray, the great Jim Gray. Like, for the legend that Tom Brady is in the history of the NFL and, frankly, in American team sports, of which I think he's the greatest athlete ever in that regard in American team sports, man, Jim Gray's just as big of a legend in the media business. He is. I mean, Jim Gray's interviewed, obviously, Brady, MJ, LeBron. He was the one who interviewed LeBron when LeBron had the infamous decision. Tiger Woods, Muhammad Ali, the greatest athletes in the history of American sports. You know, Jim Gray's been the guy to interview a lot of them, so he's a living legend. Just want to say that. But this is from the Let's Go podcast. This is former NFL quarterback Tom Brady, or 7-time Super Bowl champion. That's okay. Says that his son will play football this year, but he won't follow his father and play quarterback. He'll play tight end. Interesting. Because he wants to be like Rob Gronkowski. Brady said, quote, he wants to be a tight end like Gronk. I actually texted Gronk and I'm like, yo, my boy wants to be like you. And he loved it. He's like, that's so great. How about that? Tom Brady's son is going to play tight end in the NFL. How cool is that? That's fun. So Tom Brady's son. Philip is in the comments. Okay, he says, I've got the Lions in an upset, 34-31, Lions walk-off field goal. Well, listen, of course I'm rooting for my pick. I want to be right. I actually didn't have the opportunity. Maybe I should have. Let's see if I have the graphic. I'm going to see if I can load this real quick. I may still have the graphic of my record last year and how I hope to improve on it, because I want to be accurate. I don't want to just tell y'all pulling some numbers out of nowhere. Hang on. I should have. I'm literally looking for graphics right now as we speak live on the show. Some reason I cannot find it. Let's see. Oh, wait. No, never mind. That's my Super Bowl record. Okay, so I don't have my record from last year on the show, like my prediction record. I'll be able to pull it up hopefully pretty soon. But yeah, there you go. But I think it was, don't quote me on this, but I think I was around a little over 60% predicting games, which I guess isn't that bad relative to how difficult it is to try and predict 272 football games, not including the playoffs. So let's see if I can hit 70% this year. That's what 70% games correct. I know that's difficult, but might as well shoot for the moon, right? If you're gonna swing, might as well swing for the fences. I'm not trying out here hitting base hits. I mean, I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be. Hank Aaron, not Ichiro. No disrespect to Ichiro, he was great. Kansas City 30, Detroit 28. Although I would not be shocked at Detroit upset. That is the very reason I would take Detroit and the points. I'd take Detroit plus 4.5. That's not if I were a bet man. That's safe for Friday. But that's what I got. All right, that is all the time after today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by. Please be sure to check out Carving It Up live on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, right here on Twitter, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. And be sure to like, share, comment, and take 2 seconds out of your day. Hit that big red subscribe button. Become the 200 subscriber. We will celebrate you on the show in short order. And also be sure to go check out and subscribe to the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network, right here on YouTube, as well as any and everywhere you get your podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, any and everywhere you get your favorite podcast. On Friday's show, listen, we'll have the Vol View on Friday. Most importantly, and we'll talk about Caleb Williams on Friday too. Excited to get into that topic. We are going to have a real-life NFL game to predict. Well, a lot of games to predict, but a game to react to on the show to lead it off. Chiefs, Lions, Kansas City 30, Detroit 28. That's what I got. Cannot freaking wait. See y'all on Friday. Have a great week, y'all. Please be sure to, please stay, please be safe out there. There we go. I know how to speak English now. Please be sure to take care of your physical as well as your mental health, and please be sure to contact your local state representatives and senators to demand change for gun violence in America, folks. We got to stop this. We got to find a way to stop this from happening over and over. Got to. Football's tomorrow. Chiefs, Lions, once again. Chiefs 30, Lions 28. Take Detroit in the points. Cannot wait. All right, have a great week, y'all. See you on Friday. The Vol View, NFL predictions, react to Chiefs, Lions, Caleb Williams. It's going to be a loaded show. Who knows? We may even get a guest, for all I know. See y'all on Friday once again. God bless you all. Peace out. Check out the 8 o'clock spot, too. It's fun. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.